If you live a life where you feel like you're lucky and things happen to you, they do. And it's all because your outlook on life is actually just ignoring or not putting energy into the negative sides.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, who spent 3 years in Bloomington, Indiana with her family as a small child, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me for the latest episode of the Running for Real podcast. I'm so excited that you are here right now. And I want to thank you to week 2 of the podcast. It has been live for a week now. And the feedback has been great. It's been wonderful to see that you're actually enjoying it and hearing your thoughts on the episode. So thank you so much to anyone who has downloaded. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for subscribing. I want to thank you for reviewing. Whatever you've done to help me, it really has meant so much to me. And I really have read everything you've been putting up there. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I do have an exciting giveaway that I'm going to tell you about later in the episode to give away 5 training plans from my husband and coach, Steve. I know many of you have asked about his training plans, and he has actually made some. And listen in later in the episode and you will hear how you could be one of 5 winners to get this plan ahead of time before anyone else. So stay tuned and listen for later in the show. Today we have Neely Spence-Gracey on the podcast. She's a friend of mine. We've been friends about 10 years now. She's an elite runner, although actually I should say, I say she's a friend and she is a wonderful friend, but I made such an embarrassing mistake during this episode when I assumed she was doing Boston. I didn't do my research, but I guess that's another Running for Real moment. And she corrects me and she kind of said that everyone thought she was doing Boston, but felt a bit stupid during that moment. And you will hear that in the episode. Last week, I released 4 episodes, which was one just a background one on myself and what Running for Real is really all about. One with Matt Fitzgerald, one with James Dunn, one with Sindra Kamphoff. So we kind of hit across nutrition, marathon, strength and flexibility, and the mental training, which I would say is pretty good to hitting all areas. And, it's been great to hear from you and see what you think. So thank you so much. And when it comes to Neely, you might see her successes. You might have heard of Neely and you might have seen, wow, she is fast, or wow, she's had a lot of great results. But she's also been through a lot of hard times, and you'll get to hear about those today. And Neely is so real with them, and that's rare in an elite runner, which is why I wanted to bring her on the show. So that's enough from me. Let's get on with the episode and meet Neely. Hello, Neely Spence-Gracey. I nearly said just Neely Spence there. I'm so used to your former name, which I will explain in a minute. But thank you so much for being here today for the Running for Real podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm excited to chat with you, Tina.
Yeah, I'm excited. And as you saw, I kind of stumbled there over your name at the beginning there. And for those of you listening, Neely and I have been friends for probably coming up on 10 years now. And we met through Division 2 college running, where you were just Neely Spence then. And since then you have married your husband, and that's with the double name now. So maybe kind of tell us the story with you and your running. You do have a rather interesting one. And if people don't know it already, they probably are interested to hear it. So maybe if you could share the whole story with including your birth and then just growing up as in a running family.
Yeah. One of the things that I think a lot of people learned last year is that I was born while my dad was running the Boston Marathon. So in a way, it seems like running has been a part of my life, and I was sort of destined for this career path. But it hasn't come easily, and it's come with, definitely struggles along the way, but it's shaped and defined who I am and the opportunities that I have. And it all started when I decided to commit seriously to competitive training and racing in 8th grade. And that was sort of the point for me where I was watching the Foot Locker National Championships on TV, and it's the top high school athletes in the country all competing, 40 girls, 40 boys. And I looked at my dad and I said, I want to go. I want to be there and I want to be one of the best. And he said, well, maybe you should start training, because at this point I really hadn't done anything seriously. And so I said, okay, tell me what to do. And from that moment on, I made the decision that I wanted to be good and that I wanted to put the work forward. And I ended up, after a couple years of trying, making it to the national championships. And so I ended up going twice in high school. I was 8th as a junior and 4th as a senior. And then as a senior in high school, I ended up winning the 2 mile at the national championship that spring. So, I really was able to take the running to the highest level at the high school age, and then went on to run in college at Shippensburg University. And I really enjoyed the opportunity that I had to compete as a collegiate athlete. I looked at many schools, I had many opportunities, and I chose Division II because I knew that I wanted to continue running after college. And for me, I didn't want college training and college athletics to squelch that spirit. And so I felt like it was very competitive, but I also enjoyed being towards the front of the group. I won 8 national titles while at Shippensburg, and I think that it was a really great stepping stone for me in my development towards becoming a professional athlete.
Yeah. You just answered about 4 of the things I was going to ask you. So in one go. So well done for that one.
I tend to do that. I'll ramble on. So.
No. It's not rambling at all. And I love hearing it. And even for me, knowing all of that, it's a great reminder, and just your attitude towards it. And, you mentioned at the beginning there about how, it wasn't a case of kind of your dad like pressured you into it, and it was like, this is what you have to do, kind of almost like a family business. But it seemed like it was completely natural, your decision. And then your dad was kind of like, okay, I can help you get there. And then, as you mentioned, you did go on to run at Shippensburg. Was him being the coach any part in that? Like, just felt kind of comfortable and natural to keep him as the coach? Or was it that you saw Shippensburg and that just happened to be the place that you felt most comfortable and he just happened to be there?
I think it was a combination of all of those things. And my dad started training me. He was my coach from 8th grade until I actually graduated from Shippensburg in 2012. So I think that made the transition much more smooth for me because I knew his training. He knew me as an athlete. I didn't have to learn how to work with a new coach, and I didn't have to have that transitional period of a new coach learning how to work with me as an athlete. So I feel very fortunate that I had that. So yes, it definitely was part of that decision, because when I was doing the recruiting process and I was talking to coaches, a lot of them were saying, the first year it's a big transition, and what we want is our athletes to just maintain what they did their senior year of high school. And then beyond that, we start to develop them. But we give them a year of grace where they can figure out this whole college thing. And I was like, what? I don't want that. Like, I'm working way too hard and things are going well. I want to continue progressing. And so for me, that was a step forward that was very natural. And going to Shippensburg was also my hometown. So that took some of the stress out of it too. I didn't have to go far away from home. And Shippensburg also had a major that I was really interested in. So I majored in communication with a minor of coaching. And that's now what I do as a career. I have an online coaching business. And so I've directly applied my major, and that was really unique. Not many schools had that. So that was a really big draw for me in going to Shippensburg as well.
Yeah, and you've done so well with that. You were telling me just a few days ago that you have actually maxed out on the amount of clients you can have, which is amazing. Congrats on that. Clearly doing a good job. And Neely is one of those people, for those of you listening, if you ever go to her Facebook page, you will see that she is just, there's like person after person after person whose life she has impacted, who is thanking her. It's just, if you ever want to feel good about the world, go to Neely's stuff, because she's helping so many people all over, and it's been pretty cool to see. But great that that was able to be a good transition for you. And you didn't have to go through that year of growing because you already had, obviously, your dad there and you knew what you were doing essentially because you had him. And then did you ever kind of wonder when you were in school, like, I wonder what life would have been like to go to a Division I? I mean, I know I had that kind of thought, but never really actually thought to myself, oh, I wish I did it. But did you ever wonder what life would have been like if you were at one of the biggest schools where you were fighting even for a spot on the team?
Absolutely. It was really interesting because of all of my friends, I'm the one that went Division II and the rest of them went Division I. And it was really interesting to see the contrast between the success that I had as an athlete and how often, more times than not, a lot of my friends really struggled at the D1 level. And I think in hindsight, look back and regret the decision.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Division II is for everyone. It's certainly not. But I think it's important to not get caught up in that D1 mentality because I think that how we are going to be most successful is if we are happy and we're in a place where we feel supported. We have a team that we work well with, that there's a good group dynamic, and we have a coach who we can really trust to guide us. And that's how we're going to be the best and, maximize ourselves. And I think oftentimes there's D1 schools that it's more about, well, we want you to be the best. And so instead of taking you from where you are and working really individually to get you to where we think you can be, it becomes a lot more of, let's throw everyone into higher mileage, high intensity, and those that survive will do really well. And we know that they're worth our time. And so I saw several of my friends transfer back to, schools closer to home so that they could get away from that. I saw a lot of people get injured. Friends who I had who really, hated running after that and really still to this day want nothing to do with running because it just fried any love that they had for the sport. In terms of how I would best guide someone, I would say you need to go to a place, visit multiple different divisions, different types of schools, small schools, big schools, and figure out where you're going to be the happiest, where you feel the most at home. And that's where you're going to run the best.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I think so many high school runners kind of get tangled in this, I need to go to a big school or I need to go to a D1. And it doesn't even have to be a big D1. It can be, I want to just go to a big school, and they just get lost, as you mentioned. Like, it's that whole mentality of either, here's the training, you either make it or you don't. Good luck. And it ends up burning people out and they don't want to do it anymore. So I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think there are a lot more things to consider. And like you said, it's mostly about where you feel the most comfortable. And I don't know if you agree, but I kind of almost think that's the same with even recreational running. You don't want to go to a place where you're left feeling like, you're running with this group and you're running with someone faster than you, but you're left feeling like, oh, I can only just about keep up and I don't feel great about myself. Like there's so many things you can take that with to the rest of your running life as well as
absolutely.
Just during college.
And not even just running. I mean, with, work culture as well. You need to be in a place where you're happy and you're comfortable. And, I found in my adult life, just where you live is very important too. Being happy with waking up each day and the view you have looking out your window, because that's important. And that's something that's going to change your outlook on how the whole day is. So it can be carried over into any aspect of life. I really do believe.
Great. And you definitely have a wonderful place to look out to. And actually, Neely is getting a house built for her right now and kind of has shown some pictures of what it's going to look like and talk about having a nice view to look at every morning. I mean, that where you're going to live, amazing. And I hope someday I can come over and check it out because that would be wonderful to see.
You are welcome anytime. Colorado is amazing.
I know. I'm so jealous of you living there. And I just realized, so I told you at the beginning that I was going to ask you for a hidden talent or something that people wouldn't know about you. And I completely forgot. So I'm going to ask you right now, what would you like to share with us that's unique about you?
So this is a funny question because I used to have my go-tos, but now I feel like those are just commonly known things about me.
You've used them up.
I've used them all up. And so I was on my run this morning and I was trying to think, what is something that's unique? And it's always hard to think of something that is unique about yourself because to you, that's just normal. But one of the things that came to mind is that I have a goal for 2017 is to read 17 books in that year, because in college, I focused really hard on my studies and read only necessary reading materials. And then after college, I was super burned out from reading and I just did not read for a couple of years. But the funny thing is, I want easy, fun reads, things that I don't have to think that deeply about. I like to pick up a book and get lost in a story. And what I do is I try each night to read for like 15 minutes or so before I go to bed. But one of the funny things is where I do most of my reading is in the pool. So I aqua jog a couple days a week and I go to the pool and I just do it on the side and waist deep water. So not super deep. And I'll do hip mobility and different like exercises on the side of the pool. And I'll just lay a towel there on the side and I read. And I always get the strangest looks from people. But I enjoy it and it makes the time pass really quickly. And I get my stretching in and I feel so much better as a result.
Okay, so I have a few questions there. One, do you think people are giving you strange looks because of the exercises you're doing in the water or because you're reading by the pool?
Probably both.
Okay. And then secondly, how do you do that logistically without splashing the water everywhere? Or it does get wet?
It doesn't get too bad. Every now and again, I'll get a little bit splashy, but usually I'm not moving. Like I'm not trying to get in a workout. I'm just trying to flush out my muscles in the water. So it's not overly intense exercise. So it doesn't tend to get really splashy, but sometimes I'll read in the hot tub and then the jets will like splash up and I try to hold it up really high and keep it out of the wet zone. But, you know, I think it is funny because it creates a lot of conversations. So one, people will ask, what are you doing? And then I explain, like, I'm a runner. And then they're like, oh, are you injured? I'm like, no, I just get in the pool and stretch and like shake my muscles out. And then they're like, oh, what are you reading? And then, of course, it's always embarrassing because I look like this hardcore athlete, like stretching in the water. And then I'm like, just like this murder mystery, you know, like it's pretty funny. So I stick mostly to fiction and I have not read really many running books or anything like that. I like to escape, you know, sort of my world and go to someone else's.
Yep. No, I think that's good. And actually, I feel the same way when people say to me, oh, what running books do you recommend? I'm like, well, other than How Bad Do You Want It, which I think he mentioned you in there, didn't he, Matt Fitzgerald? Yeah. Other than that, I haven't really read too many.
Either. It's on my shelf, though.
Yeah. And how many have you read in 2017 then so far?
I feel like I'm actually doing pretty well. I'm on number 6 right now.
Yeah. I'd say that's a good start for sure. Yeah. Definitely. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing that unique information there. So, okay, you were very successful in high school, successful in college. And then once you got out, you kind of had a few years of struggle. And I think people would really resonate with this because you kind of had one thing hit after the next. So maybe you could explain a little bit about that. Just when people look at you now and think, oh, you know, she's so lucky. Well, you weren't always so lucky. So maybe you could explain a bit about that to the listeners.
Yeah, of course. Running is a brutal sport, you know, and it's amazing when things are going great and it's horrible when things are not going well. And it impacts every aspect of our lives, right? And so in 2012, I suffered my first injury. I ended up breaking my foot in a cross-country race. And it was just 6 months before the Olympic trials. And I really tried to get back into shape and get ready to run in my first ever Olympic trials. And it didn't come together. It didn't happen. And my foot was not healed and I was not able to compete. And that was really devastating. But, I use the Elliptigo and I was able to cross train. And once I got that, my overall outlook and positivity really turned around, because before that I was stuck on the bike, inside, in the pool, inside, isolated by myself. And I think that's the hardest part about being injured, is that it's so isolating. You're already upset because you can't run. And I'm a social runner. So that was my social time. I'm going to practice, I'm running with my friends, and it's also a stress reliever, right? And so all of a sudden, like, all these things that used to be such a positive part of my life are just taken from me. And so I loved the Elliptigo because I was able to get outside. If I had friends that were running, I would Elliptigo along with them, and it just made me feel so much happier as a result.
Yeah.
And I really responded well. Once I was fully healed, I was able to get back to training really quickly, and I ran 3 PRs within 6 months and qualified for a couple world teams. And I was like second and third at 2 US national championships in the roads. So I really do think that having the Elliptigo helped me get through some of that difficult time where I couldn't train, but it allowed me to maintain a solid base still. So then fast forward to spring of 2013. So pretty much just a year later, after the first injury, I fractured my fibula. And so I was knocked out for the spring track season with that. And then fall of 2013, I got Lyme's disease. And so I missed all of that. Then right when I was coming back, things were finally starting to feel good. And I felt like myself again. I broke my kneecap on a run. And it took about 4 months for them to figure out, 3 months to figure out what exactly was wrong. And then I ended up having to get surgery on my knee. And so it was just pretty much 2 years of complete frustration and, a lot of it being just really bad luck. It wasn't necessarily overtraining or anything like that had caused the injuries. A lot of it was just stepping on the wrong thing at the wrong time. And so, but with each one, I learned more about myself. And I'd say with the last one, with the kneecap thing, the biggest thing I learned was get as much information as you can. Get an X-ray, get an MRI. I think I got 6 different opinions till someone finally figured out that I had something called patella bipartite, which is a genetic problem where your kneecap is literally separated because it never fully fused into bone. And so my other knee has it, but hopefully I never have any issues with that. So I end up having knee surgery, and within a month I was able to get back to running, and it's been just a slow, steady progression since. But I remember that first run back, it was horrible. It was, snowing and nasty outside. But of course, I'd been inside for months. And so all I wanted to do was go outside, and I got to run 2 by 5 minutes with a 5-minute walk in between. And it was so disheartening because I felt so strange running. I didn't know, if I would ever be able to run what I have before. And during this time, of course, it's my career as well. And so I see my paycheck getting smaller and smaller, and the reality starts to hit of, is this worth continuing? Do I keep pushing onward, or is this just a sign that I need to move on, step away from running and, get back to it at some point at a different level? But, and something kept me going, and I am so fortunate that, now I've been able to, continue to make it my career. And I'm at a point right now where I feel like I can confidently say I'm probably stronger and faster than I've ever been. But it did not come easily. And rebuilding after taking those 4 months off with the knee thing, it took me a solid 6 to 8 months till I felt like myself again. And it was just slowly chipping away at fitness. You can't rush it. And it's just rebuilding and letting time pass and hoping that you can continue that progression, continue to be smart, listen to the body, and move forward and set new goals and be okay with starting out at not where you want to be, but just be happy that you're at least able to get back on the starting line.
Yeah, so true, so true. And I'm glad at the beginning there you mentioned, there's so many things I want to ask you about that, but I'm glad that you mentioned about that first run back, because I think in our heads we have this image of like, once I get running again, and you think of this like beautiful sunny day and you get out there with a giant smile on your face and you're like, this is amazing, I'm running, and you have this vision, but it never quite works out like that. No. So I'm glad you mentioned it wasn't a nice day and you didn't enjoy it, and but it's a starting point, as you mentioned. And you said about how that day you kind of thought to yourself, is this really worth it? Do I need to move on? Was that the moment more than any other that you kind of thought, should I quit? Is it time? Or was it during the injury process that you felt that maybe it's time for me to like let go and move on to something else?
It was definitely partially during the process as well. I felt extremely frustrated because I knew something was not right and what I was doing wasn't helping. Just taking time off wasn't resolving my problem. And once I finally got the x-ray and they could see that my kneecap was broken, then it made sense. But at first it was just like, no, I should be fine. Like, you just have to take a few weeks off if something's just, strained and you have a little bit of inflammation and you just need it to calm down. But I knew deep down that wasn't the case. And that's what kept me going, knowing that the answers that I had were not the right ones. And that, I knew that I need to trust my gut, that there was a bigger problem. And once I found out that there was a bigger problem, then I was so much more motivated because I could actually fix it. But I think the hardest part is the unknown. What can I do? And that was what was really difficult for me because I just couldn't figure it out until I knew that my kneecap was broken, because I kept saying, I feel like something's broken. And the body is amazing. The body will heal itself, but you have to give it the ability and opportunity to do it. And when my kneecap was broken and it wasn't going to grow back together magically, then I learned, okay, now I need to do something else. And as soon as I had the surgery, it was amazing. I would see progress from, my morning to the evening. I could see a difference. And that really helped encourage me and get me going again. It was the day in, day out of not knowing what was wrong that just really started to wear me down.
Yeah, I'm sure. And were you able to cross train at all, or was it you had to take that full time of nothing?
I was able to do a teeny bit of cross training. I couldn't use the bike. As long as I did the elliptical or elliptigo, I was fine because I didn't really have to bend my knee as much. But anything that I had to bend my knee, really, I struggled with. And then I remember right when it first happened, it was really bad. And I actually did the arm bike for a little while just to sweat a little bit. And it was the lowest part of my life because I was like, I cannot believe I'm sitting here like using this silly machine to do the arm bike just so that I can get in a little bit of a sweat. But, we're crazy like that. Sometimes that's the therapy you need, is just, I need to get my heart rate up a little bit. I need to feel like I did a little something today. And I was thankful for that, machine at the time.
Yeah.
So being injured is never easy. It's never fun. And my recommendation is get as much information as you can, rule out as much as you can, because that's how you're going to remain positive, is knowing how you can fix the problem. And until you know what the problem is, it's hard to know how to fix it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's too tempting to kind of let our ego or our money troubles kind of make us think, oh, I'll just, see what happens, when, like you said, deep down that something is wrong and this time off isn't going to heal it. But like you said, it is that fear of the unknown and not knowing, do I need a month off? Do I need 3 days off? Whereas if you just swallow your pride and go get the test done, then you can know where you're at. They can say to you, all right, it's going to need this, you're going to need to do this. And then you can actually get healing both physically and emotionally and accept it. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. So since then, you've been moving up and up and up. And, we'll go on to talk about your marathon and half marathons, and Boston you have upcoming. But one thing that's really stuck out to me that you've been doing over the last few years, which is eerily similar to what I do with my strength training coach. And I've told you this before, that I could literally be in your workout and you could be in mine, because our strength training programs are pretty much exactly the same. But when was it that you realized the importance of strength training? And what would you like to say to anyone listening who's kind of been ignoring my pleas about it, but maybe they'll listen to you?
Yes. Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because I definitely feel like strength training is something that has helped me stay healthy since my injuries, that whole string of issues that I had. And I usually lift twice a week, but I do core stretching and some different body weight strength training almost every day. I usually give myself one day a week where I don't do anything extra other than just run. And I can tell a big difference if I go off of it. You know, even when I take breaks at the end of a season of training, I find that if I can do just 5 or 10 minutes a day of some of these little, strengthening things, I can recover so much better and I'll get back into training more quickly. And it's amazing how something that small can make that much of a difference, but it really does for me. And I can tell when I start to neglect it, because I'll get little niggles here and there. And it's like, oh no, here we go. So I do a lot of balancing work to help strengthen my ankles and my lower extremities, because that's where a lot of my issues are. And even if it's just 5 minutes before I start my run, I will put one of my couch pillows on the floor and just do some single leg squats and some different balancing and wobbling my foot back and forth or forward and back, circles, different things to help loosen up my ankles, my calves, my shins before I head out the door. So it can be so simple, but it really will pay off. And as a coach, I tell my athletes, just think of it as like an extra mile. That's really nothing to add in. But if you do 5 to 10 minutes right before a run or right after a run, you already have that time blocked off. 5 to 10 minutes is really no time at all when you have 24 hours in the day, but it can go so far over time. So I definitely recommend, if you don't already do these things, finding some little routines that you can add in a few days a week, because it's really going to pay off.
And what would you say the difference between what you do now with the weightlifting and with those 5 to 10 minutes you say a day, the difference now is compared to what if people say, okay, well, I already do 5 minutes of planks and some sit-ups every day, so I'm doing enough. What would you like to say to those people?
I think the biggest thing is you have to keep the body guessing. It's just like if you ran 4 to 5 miles every day and did nothing else, you're going to stagnate. You're going to plateau and you're not going to be able to move forward. But if you add in some hill repeats on one day, or some strides, some faster pickups towards the end of one of your runs, or one day you do 3 miles, but then the next day you do 6 or 7. And so you're adding in some variety and keep the body guessing, because that's how we get faster, is by stressing the system in different ways. And it's the same thing with strength training. You can't do the same thing over and over. And so a lot of my programs that I've done when I work with, a strength coach is only for 4 to 6 weeks. And then we change things up because the body will get used to it. You get strong, and it's fun, because from when you start to when you finish, you can tell a difference. I remember I started and it was we were doing some push-ups, and I could do 10 pretty solid when we started. And by the end, I could do 20 and it felt fine. And it was just within a month of work doing them, twice a week. But of course, then it's well, I want to keep doing that because now I'm finally good at it. But that doesn't help anything, right? We have to then stress the system. So now we're going to go to pull-ups and we're going to do something different. And then, of course, I'm starting and I'm I can do 2. This is terrible. Yeah. But by the end, I can do 7 and this is great, So I think it's really important to mix it up, have variety. Don't get bored too. That's the other thing is a lot of the time why people don't want to do these extra strength training is because it's boring. Over time, you just get so used to it. And it's oh, here I go again. Whereas if you can mix it up, You have this different variety, and then it's actually more fun and more exciting.
That's so true. That's so true. And I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because that's something I really don't mention enough is that, the variety and the stressing your body with new exercises is part of the fun, and seeing how you progress is also a great way to do it. And, obviously this has paid off. I mean, you've been running so well in the last few years. You've run 2 marathons. You've run 2:34 in the marathon and 69 in the half, which for most of you listening is going to probably have your mouth dropping to the floor. But, obviously for you, even with how well you've been running, even with what you went through as a struggle, motivation lacks sometimes, you struggle sometimes and find it hard. So how do you kind of stay strong, or what mental tactics do you use when you are in a race and kind of going through that doubt?
Self-doubt is definitely something that I think we all struggle with. And it's not something that's talked about enough or referenced, because when you're out there, at some point during a race, every single person is going to have that moment of decision where you have to keep pushing, even though your body is saying stop. You're tired, you still have a long way to go, and you have to find a way to work through that and make it to the finish line. And I've talked with sports psychologists about this. One of my classes for coaching was sports psychology, and I absolutely loved it. I found it so fascinating because it was so applicable to everything I was doing. And so in college, I actually would meet once a week with my professor, and she would teach me about reframing my thoughts, how to remind myself that I belong, that I can do this, that it's possible. And that's what really has helped me, especially in marathons, when there's a lot of time to think. In a 5K, yes, you go through it, but it's very brief, and then you can suck it up and get to the end because you only have like a mile to go. But in a marathon, you hit 13 miles and you're like, oh my gosh, I've run for, a really long time, and now I have a really long way to go. And how in the world am I going to finish? How is this even going to happen? And so I practice a lot during my training to prepare myself for those times where, I come up with these little mantras, and it's actually gotten a lot more interest than I had thought initially. But I've been writing on my hand with a Sharpie just a couple words that remind me of what my mantra is for that race. And each race, it's a little bit different, but I find that it really helps me push through those times where I hit that decision. Do I keep going, or do I take a break? Like, is this worth it to me? Right. And it always is. It's always worth it. But you have to learn how to talk yourself through it. And so the one that I did for my last race, it was the 15K, and I did USA. And that was because it was the USA Championships. And each letter stood for a different word. The one before that, I did the ABCs, like keep it simple. And so I did attitude, believe, commit. And those were the 3 words that I would use throughout the race to help me stay engaged and stay focused and remind myself as to why I'm putting myself through this, why this was such a fun idea before I started to spend, my Sunday morning running 13 miles all out. But, these little things that can help you. And so if you practice these mantras in workouts, then you can apply them to races and you can see success. And I should
So did you know ahead of time that you were going to be using like those ones you mentioned? Did you kind of practice with those specific ones in practice, or was it kind of you decided on the morning of what felt right?
Yeah, I usually decide a couple like the week before. Okay. And so I sort of think about it during the week, and it holds more meaning that way. Some people I know, they figure out what their mantra is and their trigger words or whatever, and they'll keep it for the whole season, because those are the things that they really need for every race and every workout. And other people like me tend to switch it up. And for me, it's been sort of as the season progresses, what I'm working on during that phase of training.
Okay.
That, will be the most meaningful for me on race day then.
Okay. Yep. Very helpful.
And like I was saying, I should probably say I am not doing Boston this year. So everyone expects or thought that I was, and I think I need a t-shirt that says that I'm not. So I ended up deciding to not do a marathon this spring and focus on getting faster. And then I plan to do one in the fall.
Okay. I'm so embarrassed about that.
Oh, no, you're totally fine.
How did I not know that?
Everyone's thought you're not the only one. Trust me.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I should have done my research a little bit better. But it's funny with you. I was like, I don't really need to do research because I can just have like a chat with her because I know her. And obviously, I should have done my research there. But no, I think that's actually a good thing. And I've talked many times about people that just kind of pound on the marathon again and again and again. I don't think it works. So I'm a big believer with you. Steve never lets me do more than 2 a year, and after every 2 I take a break. So I'm definitely with you on that one. So yes, moving on from that. So just one other thing that you kind of jumps to mind for me with you is you love where you live in Colorado. You love small brands. And I just thought maybe as something unique about you, like you're really into kind of helping local companies and being there for small brands. So why would you recommend people listening kind of check out what businesses and things are available in their local area and kind of how do they find them? Because I know you're really into like Upstart, and maybe you could just kind of share about a few of your favorites and why people should find what works for them rather than just kind of copying what other people are doing.
Totally. So when I first moved to Colorado, I have, for anyone who knows me, an extreme passion for kombucha. And if anyone has ever bought kombucha, it is extremely expensive. So when you're spending $3 to $4 a day on a bottle of kombucha, it starts to add up really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was at the Boulder Farmers Market, actually, and I just started thinking about it. Like, I wonder if there's a local kombucha place. Because at the farmers market, there's all these local people, restaurants, farm stands, and shops and different things that are there representing, the culture of Boulder. And I was like, there has to be kombucha in Boulder. And so I just Googled it, and the first one that popped up was Upstart Kombucha in Boulder. And they had to contact us. So I just clicked that and I sent them an email, and it was, that random like, hi, I'm a professional runner and I'm obsessed with kombucha. I am wondering if you would be interested in figuring out some sort of partnership to work together. I'm just looking for product, and in return, I would love to share the news about Upstart Kombucha, share it with local runners. I'm pretty involved in the community and everything. And it was so funny because they responded within minutes. And it was like, this is such a good idea. Like, we love athletes. And it's just clicked. And so I've been with them for like 2 years now. And it's such a perfect partnership for us because I'm promoting and supporting this local business, and it helps me out a ton. And so I actually had an event at our local running store 2 weeks ago, and it was a ladies' night, and we had about 30 ladies come out, and it was sponsored by Adidas. And we did this little panel where a couple of my Adidas teammates from the area were here, and we all just, we answered questions, talked about running, women's running in particular, and they had wine and cheese and crackers and stuff. And I brought kombucha for those who maybe didn't want to drink. And it was such a big hit. And everyone loved the Upstart kombucha. And I was like, this is a way that I can share their product with more people of the community. So it's a fun thing. Another brand that comes to mind is Iron Doggy, which is a running leash for your dog. So Strider is our 2-year-old Vishla, and they sent me a running leash I reached out to them as just like, hey, I'm from Colorado and we have this little running puppy. We want to teach her to run, and your leash is so cool. And it ended up being the leash that was on the cover of Runner's World with Strider.
Yeah.
And so I can't tell you how many times now I get asked, like, what leash do you use? Because that is so cool. And it is. And it's, this Colorado company. So I'm definitely someone that is very into supporting brands that I personally use and feel very strongly about. I am not someone who will just get paid to say that I use a product when I actually don't. And that's why I love the small companies. And I think that there's opportunity everywhere. You just have to really search. I have friends who are sponsored by, a local coffee shop, and they just get free coffee beans. But every time they have friends in town or whatever, they always go to the coffee shop. Which this is sort of a side story, but I had my first ever team group run for my Colorado athletes, because I actually have about 12 athletes that I coach within the, local Boulder area. And so I was like, we should all meet up and everyone can actually run together. This would be really cool. And so we met up on Saturday, and then we went to a local coffee shop who's a fellow D2 runner, and it was so fun. And so what he did was, for every half an hour that you ran, you got 25 cents off your drink. And it was so awesome to get to go to Precision Pours, this fun little craft coffee shop. And all my runners felt so special because they got a discount for being a runner. And it was just really neat. So, there's so many opportunities out there. And there's, I think, a lot of times where if you reach out, they're just looking for someone who will support them and they'll support you. And it can become this really awesome partnership.
Yep.
And, the worst that's going to happen is you never hear back or they say no, right? So it's always worth reaching out.
No, I feel the same way. And I do want to say, people listening know also that I feel the same way as Neely. That's why I wanted to ask you about this with the small brands. And your story with Upstart is pretty much the same as mine was with Kentucky Kombucha. And so, I knew this would be a good topic for you, but what Neely's saying, you don't have to be, using the professional runner card to get this. A lot of these companies just want to get out there. They want to get in front of the right people who actually care about them. And you guys listening probably are those people. So yeah, you might not have that kind of status, I guess, to use, but it doesn't mean that they aren't interested in kind of helping out runners or being with the community. So there's nothing wrong with asking and just kind of look around what's in your area. I mean, you might have something unique that's kind of what you're known for. Although obviously for me, I don't want to go with the fried chicken route. You might have something, just check it out. So I just wanted to kind of briefly go over that. And yeah, that was great. So you obviously, we've talked about a lot of it so far, but I haven't even mentioned half the good stuff you have going on. As I mentioned, you're building a house, your running is going well, your coaching is maxed out. You've been in Women's Running magazine. You have all these recipes on your website, which I'll put a link to in the show notes for this episode, which I should mention at tinamuir.com/episode 5. So what do you want to say to people who say, well, you're just lucky, you're just really blessed and you just get everything? So is there anything you'd like to say to people who kind of think, oh, life is good for you, well, good for you kind of thing?
I think it's so funny because that's such perspective, right? If you live a life where you feel like you're lucky and things happen to you, they do. And it's all because your outlook on life is actually just ignoring or not putting energy into the negative sides. Because we all have good days and we all have bad days. But if you are focusing on the positives, things are always going to look so much better.
Yeah.
And I've learned this from my husband a lot more than I would say. It wasn't as natural for me, but he's just someone that seems like everything always goes right for him. He always seems to get lucky. And it's so frustrating sometimes because it seems like things just fall into place. But the reason being is that he's always on the lookout for the opportunities. and he seizes them as they come.
I love
and
that.
that's how luck happens, right? And so I always love that quote that talks about, the harder I train, the luckier I tend to get in races, right? And I think that's true in life as well. The harder you focus on the positives and ignore the negative sides, the so much better, and everything's just going to feel so much better and more positive, and your outcomes are going to be way more successful. It's just about rephrasing that thought of, those thoughts and how you look at the world.
So true. So true. I love that. And shout out to Dylan there for inspiring you with those words. That's really cool. Exactly. And obviously he's been a huge part of your career and your support and everything. So that's been great to see. So I just want to take a moment to go over the Running for Real 4, which are 4 questions I'm going to ask you to kind of get a bit deeper into you and kind of see what unique tips you have for us. So I want to start with a unique nutrition tip, or maybe something that you like to eat that people might not know about, whatever you'd like to share.
Absolutely. So my favorite one that I'm on a kick with right now is the coffee taper. So the week of a race, 4 days out, I will stop consuming any caffeine. And then the morning of the race, I will have caffeine as usual. And it gives your body, it recreates that sensitivity to caffeine so that on race day, you get a even stronger ergogenic effect from the boost of caffeine.
Even just the 4 days?
Yep. Your body just needs 4 days. How I train is during the week, I only use coffee on workout days and long run days. So for me, that's Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. And then the rest of the days, I still love the culture of coffee. So I have decaf coffee, but you can do tea or anything that's non-caffeinated. And I find that really helps make the coffee taper go a lot more smoothly, because if I have coffee every single day and then all of a sudden I don't have it for 4 days, it would be a lot more difficult. But if you focus on only having caffeine on those major workout long run days, or, moms on the days that you really need caffeine because your kid was up all night, then, it'll help your body handle that coffee taper the week of a race.
Yeah, so true. And I love the video, Chris Heusler of Run Weston, for those of you who know that. You guys did some videos on that, which were pretty funny. So I will put a link to that in the show notes. So make sure you go check that out as well. Okay, next I want to ask you a running for real moment. So something that you'd like to share with the audience that kind of lets them know that you are human here.
The thing that I think I want to share regarding this is, Tina, you said, share something that's real, something that, is raw and maybe even a little emotional, something that someone could relate to. And I figured I would share. So 3 weeks before the New York City Marathon, I was out on a run and I got a Charlie horse in my calf. And it was at mile 10. I was supposed to do 11 miles and I had to walk the last mile, like limping. And I ended up having to take 5 days off. And if anyone knows anything about marathon training, typically 3 weeks out is your biggest week. So you have your highest mileage, your longest long run, your hardest workout. So I missed that whole big, important week and I was devastated. I was so upset. And what I did was I just really tried to focus on staying in the present, taking each minute as it came and maximizing what I could do versus freaking out about what I couldn't do. And I think, focusing on what you can control is the key. And so, had I tried to push through, I definitely would have not shown up to the starting line healthy. But because I was patient, because I took those 5 days, I got in the pool, I got on the bike, I had massage, dry needling, cupping, physical therapy, stim, like everything to help support recovery. And I knew I was doing all the right things and I just had to be patient and let the body do its thing. And I was able to get back into running. I was able to get back to training and I had zero problems during the marathon. I felt great. I had no issues at all with my calf. And so I think, the takeaway from this is that like injuries are never ideal, but when something flares up, being smart from the get-go is key, because pushing through never results in a positive outcome. And so for me, it was obviously really poor timing, but everything was perfectly fine. And the way I was able to handle it emotionally, I think really helped me get through, each moment, each day, controlling what I could. And I think it helped me heal faster and allowed me to show up on race day healthy and ready to go.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing, Neely. That's, obviously something that a lot of people wouldn't admit to, but, thank you for sharing and being real with that. And I'm sure a lot of people can resonate, because that 3-week mark, as you mentioned, it is a big time, but that's often when things kind of turn up. And
Exactly.
It's at the time when your self-doubt is actually pretty high, because you're closing in on the race. So thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. And then to switch to the other way, to go off a positive. So tell us about a high moment and why that meant so much to you in your career.
I would say of all the races I've done, I've been doing this for over half my life now. The one that still stands out the most to me as the highest point is the DMR, which is a distance medley relay, indoors at nationals my freshman year. And we were on the track. Each athlete runs a different distance, and I ran the mile as the anchor leg. And we were in Texas, and it was, like I said, my freshman year, the first opportunity to win a national title. And we had all forgone individual events to focus on this relay. And so my teammates and I, we each have to put together our best race on the exact same day and have everything come together perfectly. And it did. It was completely magical. We ended up setting the Division II national record in the process. We won our first national championship. And it was incredible because we all did it together and we got to celebrate the victory. And that's what made it that much more meaningful. I went on to win multiple other individual national titles, the next few years, but that one stands out as the most meaningful. And when I think about my racing career and everything, that moment is the one that I hope I never forget.
Yeah, that's so cool. I didn't know that was your highest moment, and I would have been there at that meet as well. I'm guessing that was in Houston.
It was, yeah.
That the one? Yeah, yep, I was there too. That's so cool, and I didn't know that. And is that still the record now?
It is not. Grand Valley ended up breaking it after I graduated.
Grand Valley.
I
know. They were my big rivals when I at the school out. Oh man, I have some stories about Grand Valley I could tell you guys, but I might have some Grand Valley listeners here, so I don't want to say too much. Yes. But okay. Thank you for sharing that. And finally, what do you tell yourself right before the gun goes when you're standing on the start line?
I briefly alluded to it before, but that's when I almost find I have the most amount of doubt, is when I'm on the starting line. I see all these amazing athletes around me, and I start to question if I should be there, if I really belong there. When I look over and I see 3-time Olympians or American record holders or anything, and it's like, why am I even here? And so I have to talk myself through it, right? And, I try to stay as internally focused as I can. All I can do is maximize my potential today. And I just want to see what I can accomplish on this day. No matter what the weather is, no matter who my competition is, if I run my best race, I'm going to be satisfied. And so moments before the race, I think about, what do I control? And the number one thing is my breathing, because my breathing is what's going to guide my effort throughout the race. And I never like to go into a race with a set pace goal. I like to go off of my effort. And so, sometimes I'll get asked in interviews like, well, what's your goal? Like, what time are you shooting for? You know what? Really, I have no idea. Like, I want to go out and I want to run hard, and I'm going to see what that means. And whether that means 2:28 marathon or a 2:35 marathon, I'm going to maximize what I can do today. And that's all I can ask of myself. And so, taking the pressure off of time and pace and just letting my body feel it out. And that's how I really rely on my breathing and that rhythm to help me determine the effort that I'm ready to do on that day.
Oh, I love that. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, Neely, because that is exactly what I'm telling people. And we've had a few people recently tried it and kind of said they've run by effort, run by feel, run their best, and they've run better for it. So I'm so glad that you mention it, because I am exactly the same way. And see, if you don't listen to me, listen to Neely. But I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. And for anyone listening, how would they be able to, what would be the best way to kind of follow you or what you're up to?
So I have my blog, neelyruns.com. And then following me on Instagram is my number one goal right now, is to break 10,000 followers on Instagram. And I'm so close. So you guys can help me. So that's Neely S-Gracey.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, make sure you go follow Neely and let's get her over the 10K mark. Hopefully you'll have already done it by the time this goes live.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, my friend Neely. And I look forward to hearing how you get on the rest of this year and in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to that episode with Neely Spence-Gracey. I hope you enjoyed that one. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. You can do that at tinamuir.com/iTunes. You can also go to the show notes of this page, which can be found at tinamuir.com/episode 5. Now, speaking of that, I really would recommend going to watch that video that Neely and I talked about with the coffee taper with Chris Heusler, or Run Weston, as many of you know him. Really, really funny video, and just kind of, shows how addicted a lot of us are to coffee. So just kind of cool. Neely has also long surpassed the 10,000 Instagram fans she was talking about. So you're not going to help her get to 10,000, but maybe we can get her to a new level. But make sure you let her know this is where you came from, so we can show her how big the Running for Real community is. So at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that I was going to do a giveaway. I've kind of teased on my website that Steve is creating marathon and half marathon training plans for runners. And you can enter to win one of those 5 programs by leaving a rating and a review on either iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. And once you've left a review, you can email me podcast@tinamuir.com and show me a screenshot of your review. When you do that, that will enter you in the giveaway. Well, I will enter you in the giveaway, which will end 2 weeks today on May 5th. So on May 5th, I will select 5 winners from random. That's not going to be a select as in I will choose them personally. It will be a random selection. And that will give you plenty of time to build up your base for a full, half or full marathon. So you can find more information at tinamuir.com/marathon giveaway, or again at the show notes I mentioned for today's episode, which are at tinamuir.com/episode 5. If you're not sure how to leave a rating or review, there's also information on both of those places of how to leave a review. I actually made a video to show you exactly how, so keep that in mind. So to those of you who have already left a rating or review, firstly, I'd like to thank you for doing that. It really means a lot to me and I really appreciate it. But you can also enter the giveaway as well. All you need to do is email me podcast@tinamuir.com with your review screenshot and I'll enter you as well. So next week, we will be talking to Nate Helming of The Run Experience. And I'm sure many of you have heard of Nate. We're going to be talking about fitting stability and flexibility into a busy schedule, as well as how to undo the effects of sitting all day, because many of us are pretty guilty of that. So make sure you tune into that one, and I hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.